I'm still backstage. Oh, hello, everybody. How are you tonight? So, this is What is the Ask? It's our maybe fourth or fifth month taping where five friends get together and talk online about the issues that are pertinent to African Americans or Black people. So, the 2024 presidential election takes place on Tuesday, November 5th. That's less than 500 days away. As a group of five friends from Tampa and Atlanta, we meet twice a month to discuss the issues that are important to the Black community. So, what should the community demand in exchange for their cultivated or a collective vote? So, what are African Americans talking about these days? And what the indomitable question, what is the ask? No more should we go to the polls, to the ballot box, without a demand for what that vote represents. So tonight, we're a little bit without most of the panel, but tonight I'm joined with Alton Drew out of Atlanta. And we do have an interview a little bit later, so a few others will come on. But Alton and I will start off. And you know, Alton, we were just about to talk about the young man that just went to the wrong house. I think he was 15 years old or so, went to the wrong house to pick up his younger brother, younger siblings. They were twins, and got shot. And the person that shot him was a white guy, older gentleman, 85 years old, and he was a young Black male, 15, and he was shot just, and I tell you, I kid you not, just ringing the doorbell. But before you get into that, because you may not have been following this, I know how busy you are, but so the attorneys say the shooter is white and should not have been released. He was, in fact, taken down to the station, and within 24 hours, he was released. The Kansas police chief says a 24-hour hold is the max without charges in a felony. The shooting of a Black teen who rang the wrong doorbell after mistaking the residence for one a block over has sparked outrage on social media and weekend protests and calls for the shooter's arrest. Well, as of today, that shooter has been arrested. National prominent civil rights attorneys Lee Merritt, Ben Crump announced Sunday that we're taking the case and prominently criticized authorities in Kansas City, Missouri for releasing the man who opened fire, who they said as I mentioned, is a white man. So Paul is actually, his name was Ralph Paul Yarl. He was 16 years old. He was released from the hospital Saturday after he was shot just before 10 p.m. He was shot in the head and he was shot in the arm. And he was shot through the door, the front door, the glass door of the man. And the man is claiming that he was, he saw the Black man, and you know the next line, he feared for his life.
Yeah. First, condolences to the family. My
Well,
son.
the young man is alive. He went
Good.
home.
Okay.
Yeah, he did
All
go.
right.
He survived it. He did go home. But the
Okay.
question remains, why was that young man shot in the first place?
Yeah. Well, the short answer. Well, first, when my son turned 21 yesterday, so
Happy birthday.
when I hear stuff like this, of course, it's like that's the thing that grips you. Um, it was nice seeing him on that Zoom call, and the family put together a call and see him. And you try to put as far back in your mind this kind of event.
Yeah,
I can't help but think of him when I hear this kind of event.
yeah, yeah.
Now, and I'm Now, regarding the young man and the shooting, I don't know why white people are afraid of a bunch of people who are on the lowest rung of everything. That's a psychological problem. Now, some people will argue, well, you shouldn't, generalize this guy. It happens too often. And
Yes, it
then and
does.
and then when he made that statement, I was in fear. No, I get, yeah, if it was a 16-year-old who looked like him, freckle faced and what have you, I don't think he'd have had that fear at all.
He wouldn't
So
have.
he wouldn't have had that fear.
No, he
So
would not.
so he's ignorant. Anyone who thinks like that is ignorant, and anyone really beyond ignorant, anyone who thinks like that is dangerous. And
Except, okay, you're talking about ignorant and dangerous, anyone who thinks like that. Well, we are about to, from state to state, allow for open carry. What is it? Permitless open carry? Not, is it open carry or what is it?
yeah, I believe
Concealed
it's
carry. Concealed carry without a permit. Which means if everybody's walking around with a gun and all I have to say after I shoot you is that I feared for my life, and that's generally white men's statement after they've shot a black brother. I feared for my life, or stand your ground, or whatever it is that you want to call it.
right.
They're passing laws and they have not quite figured out that dynamic between white men pulling the trigger on black men and then and not going to jail or not being held accountable.
Yeah,
So we're moving fast down one lane and haven't really figured out the accountability piece when black men are shot and boys by white men.
yeah. It's it's Bernie Getz 1984, the
Yeah.
potential, right?
Hmm.
Yeah. Now, I guess I could give the devil's advocate or the legislative argument that someone hearing your argument is going to push back and say, well, you assume that white men are going to be walking up and down the streets and just have this notion to go and shoot a black man because they've got a pistol.
Yes, I
So
do.
that's the gap.
I do.
Then we'll follow that we'll follow that to this next step. If that happens, and I'm not going to discount the likelihood, I won't put a number on it, but if it happens, then what will be the response? Are blacks going to go and ask for some legislative cure? They'll ask, but they won't get it. We don't have the numbers, and we're in a culture that depending on the states, they probably don't have this in New York, but Georgia, yes. Depending on the state and its culture, they're going to say, well, no, the likelihood of that was real small. The white man who did that, we put him in jail. We're prepared for that. When it comes to so the question has to be in my mind, what kind of leverage do we have and are we willing to expend to reverse that? And I don't see a reversal.
Right.
So that's the problem. So now if you ask me, what's the likelihood? Well, I'll take a gander and say, the likelihood of that, I'll give it 20%. And it all depends on the circumstances where that, if, this hypothetical white man feels emboldened enough to do it on the street, broad daylight, because he can, and then he can come up with well, I was in fear of my life. Then then technically, my litigation warrior friends, lawyers would say, well, then the burden would be on the state to prove that this man had an intent to do so, to just indiscriminately shoot this guy, shoot a black man just because he has a weapon. Now, I think in a circumstance like that, the state would have a strong argument. So there would be a lot of weight on this white defendant to prove he didn't have the intent. So now, this hypothetical white man is not going to think beyond shooting somebody as to what consequences may fall on him. So, at a minimum, you'd have to go back to the current legislation and add more weight to the consequences in anticipation of that scenario. Now, how many black legislators are there, say in Georgia, that can put together that kind of leverage?
Mhm.
I don't know. Assume that they can. They will need allies in their respective state houses to add that extra weight. Is there the incentive to do so right now? No, because those circumstances haven't manifested or multiplied. But that's not to say that it couldn't happen.
Mhm.
There's a likelihood that you're going to have those scenarios, and some of those scenarios may go unreported. You know,
Yeah.
you're walking down some low traffic street or road, and John Boy comes along, and whether he's drunk or not, he decides to take a shot, and
Mhm.
then he uses that.
Yeah.
I while I am more in the camp of, okay, if you can carry, I'm going to carry too.
Right. And that's what's going to happen.
And that's what's going to happen.
Right.
And
Everybody's
ironically,
going to be carrying.
I've been thinking about that today, as a matter of fact, without even thinking about the young man. I was like, yeah, I need to go out there, and I need to get strapped. The
Right.
shotgun in the house isn't enough for me. I'm gonna
I
have
got to
to.
carry it. I
I
got to
gotta
carry it
carry.
in the McDonald's. And if you skip me at McDonald's,
Hmm.
then you have a problem because I'm carrying. Right.
Right, and that gets to another important. That gets to a deeper question. The mental health of this country is such that people are just snapping.
Yeah. And I think you're going to see a lot of snapping, and the Republicans are going to go nuts with this whole mental health thing and that they're not trying to really solve. Um, so I don't see this going anywhere good fast, because this young man made a mistake. He thought he was at another house. He ended up a block or two over at this man's home.
Hmm.
He rings the doorbell just like a Girl Scout selling cookies. He rings the doorbell and he gets shot through the glass.
Right.
So clearly the guy
Yeah.
sees him through the
Right.
glass.
And automatically that tells me intent. So,
Exactly.
so
Exactly.
this man had enough time
Yeah.
to see this guy, knew who he was shooting at, because from what you told me, he described him by his race. He sees him, and he
Yes.
had more than enough time
Yes.
to contemplate, to develop what we call the mens rea,
Right.
to cause this young man physical harm.
And
So he is facing jail time.
yeah, he is. But here's one of the other issues. So they take him down to the station, and then they hold him for the 24 hours, and then they release him.
Well, he should
Where,
have been
where does that
charged.
happen in the black man's world, right?
Oh, never. You get charged from the time you get smelled.
And the reason why they had to go and arrest him, pick him up again, or I think he had to turn himself in, is because of all the protests that broke out. I mean, really. So what I think is really good, and we can end on this because we're going to have to move on. But what I think is happening in the country is um, baby boomers, us, our white counterparts, and our parents who are with the lineage here, um, we had to put up with that. We had to sort of take a back seat, swallow, and allow even the injustice to occur.
Right.
And but the young people today, the Gen X, the Gen Z, the I forget what all these
Yeah.
folks are, the millennials, they are absolutely not. Um, they are not. I'm sorry, our guest asked us if it's a Zoom link, and I got to let her know it's not a Zoom link. Sydney, can you make sure Robin has a link to get in? So they aren't putting up with because they're marrying each other. They're seeing each other as true equals for the most part. And I think that they're looking to say, Tennessee guys, hey, that's not fair. This boy that gets shot, that's their age. Hey, that's not fair. Whereas we looked at it, we saw that it was not fair, but our counterparts, our white counterparts, did not see it the way that we saw it. They were too busy protecting their whiteness, if you will.
Yeah.
I don't think their children are protecting whiteness the way they did.
I think their children are taking a bit longer to get to their whiteness. And by that I mean,
Yeah,
yeah, they
this is a discussion for sure because
oh
I'm not
yeah,
sure I'm there.
yeah, I'll give a tiny example. I remember when I was in law school, there was this couple that, you know, they dressed poor, and if you're in law school, you are technically poor. But by that time, I was an older student. I'm 32, so I'm seeing life a little differently. And I'm like, and differently meant I'm seeing reality. And I just knew that, these kids, they could play the liberal shit up until it's time to sit down with an employer and they're going to determine which firm to join and become partner.
Yeah.
So these young white people, who I will not accept, I'll accept as a trading partner, which is a specific window of time. I will not, I do not expect allyship, nor do I seek it. They want to put themselves in that position to win votes, whether it's political votes, social votes, whatever. Until the time it's time for them, because let's face it, their boomer parents are living longer than their grandparents. So the boomer parents are like Queen Elizabeth. They weren't ready to give up the throne till they drop dead.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That's
their
true.
older boomer parents are not ready to give up the throne yet. Oh, we still got life in us. We're 70, but we're still going to the gym. So they're alive. They haven't given
Yeah.
up. But when it's time, they sit down and say, well, I'm not dropping dead, but I'm ready to turn it in. So it's like Vito Corleone talking to Michael right before Corleone dies in the next scene. He says, you gotta be careful who comes up to you. And they're gonna have the talk. It's gonna be son, daughter, you're gonna inherit, the couple million I've got, my little estate, what have you. Here are the rules to protecting it. And in those rules, there's going to come, these parents may give their kids a little room as to how they're going to make the adjustment, but the adjustment's going to mean shedding yourself of certain people and certain causes. And it's going to be the same game plan that their parents and grandparents and great grandparents practiced, because it's going to be about protecting the lineage, not allyship. Lineage comes first. So when these allies are walking down the little hallways in their houses and they're looking at pictures of great great grandma all the way down, they're not going to see Alton's face up on the wall.
Yeah.
And 80% of them want to make sure they don't see Alton's face up on the wall, and that's fine by me. But I go through all this to say, they have no impact on the protesting, and if they do participate in the protesting, that's about their extent, because they've always got a one way, they've always got a clear pathway to the back door and out, and then
Yeah.
next thing you know, we're left holding the bag. One more little example, and I have
Good
no
example. Good
yeah.
example.
So,
Go on.
yeah, yeah. Another good example would be, in my opinion, and I shed no tears over this, the DEI nonsense. It started really in force after George Floyd's death in 2020, and it's
Yes.
being shut the hell down in 2023.
Yeah.
Why? Because
It's
it
expedient for
it's a
political.
it yeah, it was expedient to begin it, and it's now economically feasible to shut it down. It has no impact on capital allocation, no impact on the bottom line. It was just a political show, and our allies crafted it. So if your ally crafts it, he can put it on the runway. And
Yeah.
that's what we need to understand. So no, any protest going forward has to be pushed, written by primarily by blacks, with the expectation that you're not going to get as much resource support
Mm-hmm.
for it, but you have to find other ways to fund your protest. But you have to do it on your own, calling your own shots, your own terms and conditions, lest you end up with another BLM DEI movement. So yeah, I don't give these people who hold themselves out as allies much credo, you know.
Yeah, I'd like to think though that as we go from one generation to the next, there is some we're close we're a little bit more closely aligned. So that which couldn't happen in the 1700s, some
Hmm.
started happening in the 1800s.
Right.
Then you got into the 1900s, and now we're in the 21st century, if you will. And what does that mean in terms of black-white relationships
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
the demographics shift? And I think that's one of the reasons why these aging baby boomers are bent on changing the laws to protect this white supremacy, because
Hmm.
they can see clearly that their children are not of the same ilk, if you will.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so if they can put it in laws and lock it in for the next 10 years, they
Hmm.
can control, given that Supreme Court, looking at the court system, looking at all, they can control the culture and not allow these liberals, including their
Hmm.
children, who of course can, as you say, progress to conservatism as they grow.
Yes.
But I feel like they see this window of opportunity that if they don't strike right now and break rules, break democracy, if you will, to change,
Hmm.
um, to maintain status quo, they'll lose. They'll lose,
Yeah. Yeah.
and,
Well,
legacy
yeah.
be damned, if you will.
Yeah, and I see that point. That's a powerful argument, and but it reminds me of something that JFK said. Oh God, 60 years ago. He said, I'm just paraphrasing now. He says, "We here at home, we see the world as white. You look across the ocean, it doesn't look like us."
Ah,
So and now that didn't mean that he could punch his liberal card, because he was no liberal, but he was a realist.
yeah.
Now let me fast forward. Yeah, those baby boom parents are probably, they open the door and they see little Jerome and little Becky holding hands, and like, okay, well, that was cool when I was in law school dressing poor, but I don't know now. But they also see a world where they're definitely and have to acknowledge that they are the 5%.
Mm-hmm.
So you're either going to give in and say, "Oh well, the Spanish tried to do it to the indigenous people over in Central America. I guess it's our turn."
Uh-huh.
Or as they see resources coming back to the states, as they see manufacturing coming back to the states, as they see their dollar being challenged over the next 20 years,
Yeah. We've got,
the philosophy they're going that will also equate to their philosophy and lineage being challenged. So to
yeah.
your point, to add to that,
Yeah.
they've
So
got
I'm gonna
domestic shift and global shift happening.
yeah. I'm going to interrupt and kind of move us to the next. Our speaker is here. Um, and I am just proud to have her come on board, because this is a really important week, this weekend, next week. And there she is. Hey, Robin.
Hi. Hi, everyone.
How are you? So, real quick introduction. Thank you, and I apologize for not thinking that we don't use Zoom or Meet or Google Meets, and it's kind of like, oh yeah, I should tell her we're using an entirely different platform. So, thank you for struggling to get in because I was kind of like, okay, try this. But in 2 weeks. Tampa is going to hold its municipal election runoff for Tampa City Council. It's something that most of us don't pay attention to, but elections have consequences. They are consequential, and this one is definitely a consequential election. But I don't think people really get it or understand that. So tonight, Alton Drew and Albert out of Atlanta. Albert's not with us right now, but he's going to join as soon as he can. Are being joined tonight by our guest, Robin Lockett, who is a candidate for Tampa City Council District 2. So Robin is a dedicated resident who has been actively involved in the community since she was a baby. Just kidding. But actually, she has, if you listen to some of her stories. As a professional organizer, Robin is passionate about making positive changes in Tampa neighborhoods. Now, I said neighborhoods in general, but this includes, and this is different than most politicians that we know, this includes the forgotten neighborhoods like East Tampa and Sulphur Springs. Now, note I didn't say just those two, because she's interested in all the neighborhoods and seeing what they look like, but I'm going to let her talk about that. She believes she can bring fresh ideas and innovative solutions to the table to represent the needs and the concerns of Tampa constituents. So, as I mentioned, every election is consequential for the African American community. And tonight, we're going to focus on Black issues that impact the quality of life in Tampa. So we got just a few questions to ask you. So just relax and just be Robin. Be Robin. So Robin, who is Robin? And what's motivating you to run for Tampa City Council? And it's not one of those district special seats for Black folks. This one is a citywide seat.
Who is Robin? Robin is a person that grew up in Tampa, has worked her whole life in Tampa, has two beautiful kids that she was a single mother to, two boys. And Robin has survived a lot of odds because technically Robin, the latter part of Robin's life, she came out of Robles Park. And most people coming out of Robles Park a lot end up being a statistic.
Yes. So
Robin had to make a way consciously and being intentional in regards to how she moved. Now I got pregnant at a young age. I got pregnant at 19. So Robin didn't have the idea or the know-how of what to do to go to college. I just went into mama mode, survival. Yes. But I knew that I did not want to live in the projects. That was my choice. I knew that I wasn't going to be on welfare. I knew that I was not going to be a statistic, whether it was in Robles Park or outside of Robles Park. So first chance I got a job where my very first job was with Travelers Insurance. And with that journey, I had to figure it out because I didn't own a car. So I caught the bus. And if you know, Tampa's transportation is no better from now than it was 30 years ago. And I caught 4 buses to work to get to work and then still walk from West Shore Mall to the Howard Franklin every morning for the first 4 years of me working with Travelers Insurance. So I was driven.
Yeah.
I was driven to make a better life for myself as best as I could.
Uh-huh.
And I've been able to build from that point to where I am now.
I feel like sometimes you know Tampa better than I do, and because you've been here, you've experienced what the everyday Tampan experience is. So you know not just
Oh, so it's not me. Okay.
No, yeah. Jeanette is frozen in time. Well, while we wait for Jeanette to come back, first of all, congratulations on your run, Robin.
Oh, thank you.
Mhm. My only experience with local government is having worked in local government. So, so while we saw the operational phase, I didn't get too much into the political phase. So this is interesting. Um, I would have to ask first, in in your words, what exactly is a city, and specifically, what should a city represent, whether to businesses, to its residents, to the world? I mean, Tampa's a global city. Um, it's a beautiful city. I enjoy visiting when I'm there. Went to school in Florida. I've known Jeanette for 40 odd years. I got friends and contacts there. But as a politician, how do you view a city?
I don't think I've ever been asked. So, how do I view a city?
Yeah, yeah. What is a city? I mean, again, what should it represent? What should it do? Why should I want to live there?
Oh, why? Okay. I guess in those terms, in that segment, um, I think what a city should do is represent its constituents.
Hmm.
I think, and that's a tough question. Um, what a city council does, or
No,
what is a city?
the city. Yeah, yeah. You know, I'm here in
Those are all.
Atlanta. I'm here in Atlanta. I could give some thoughts on what the city does, should do, what it means for people that live here. I, Tallahassee, small town, Lake City, small town, Tampa, larger global city. So
Now it is.
now it is right.
So I think the what the city should do is so there's always improvements. You always expect for the city to grow, but there has to be a middle ground of growth versus pushing people out that have lived here for years.
Okay.
That shouldn't happen. So if a person is living within the city of Tampa, that person should be considered in economic development and housing and clean water. So when I answer what should a city do, a city can't do anything that the council people don't allow it or the administration don't allow. So I think that growth is very important, but it shouldn't push people out. I
Okay.
think that a person should not live in the city of Tampa and can no longer identify with what has happened in Tampa. I think that the city should keep all aspects of history dealing with Tampa because that's what brings Tampa up and that's what builds Tampa. That's what has provided Tampa with its foundation. Not only create, the city should not erase a history to begin anew.
Mm, mm,
It should be built upon.
mm.
A community should not have to go through red tape to save that community or to save the identity of that community. It should be there, but the city should be encompassed of what city council represents.
Okay.
And because the people on city council and the administration represent the people.
Okay. And
So
I got one. Thanks for that response. I got excited when you said when you alluded to the city basically abandoning its history,
Oh yeah.
because here in Atlanta, this is my, oh God, second go round living in this town. I lived here in the 80s. My mom was here in the 90s, and I just moved back. I moved back, not just, I moved back here with my son 15 years ago. So
Wow.
I've had a view of how a city, in this case Atlanta, appears to intentionally be avoiding or getting rid of that history that made it.
Really?
Yes, I'm seeing, landmarks especially gone.
With ours
Uh,
too.
each neighborhood, West Midtown, the name is Abomination, but West Midtown, Midtown, certain parts of East Atlanta, all starting to look the same in terms of whether it's stores, restaurants, the architecture of residential homes, all starting to look alike. Where it's like, where's Atlanta? There was nothing wrong with Atlanta.
Correct.
So what we're building on no longer exist. So to your point, is yeah, the city council has a big role to play in the image of the city. Do you feel like the city is on a path of being gutted unless the council turns around with different policies?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Are you frozen? Can you hear us? She looks like she's frozen.
Yeah.
So thanks for
Oh.
jumping right in there when I kind of disappeared. I wasn't sure. Robin, you were frozen just then. Not sure what happened. But I think you said, to his question, you said, I thought I heard absolutely.
Hmm.
Can you hear me, Rob? I don't know if it's FMUX, but I'm not even sure why I just dropped. I thought it was because, but yeah, thanks for picking up on that interview, because I was like, oh my gosh, who doesn't look at whether they have power or juice or not?
Okay. Here
Hey,
she is.
Robin, you're good?
Yes, I don't know what happened, but yeah,
Yeah.
I agree with you, Alton. Tampa is on the verge of being has gutted.
Mm.
What we once knew is no more. And when they put new development in, they don't have the respect to even keep the name the same. West Tampa is now West River.
Mm.
So but the biggest thing to that is in regards to me uh, uh, and this journey of city council is that a lot of stuff I didn't know, a lot of things I did not know. An overlay district. What is an overlay district? What I'm finding out it's something that the community does, and it protects the characteristic of one of the things it does is it protects the characteristic of the community, right? Historically. And that got me to thinking, oh wow, what has not already been taken, what we have left, what do we have to protect? Belmont Height projects, gentrification. What is our history that we can come together as a community and say, hey, we want to create an overlay district and protect the characteristic of our homes. But what is it?
So Robin, it sounds like a really big challenge to make sure that those of us who have not typically been heard in a lot of this development are heard. So what makes you the best candidate for this position? And how do you plan to bring about that positive change, that positive inclusive change in Tampa? Because I heard what you guys were saying, but what makes you the person to make that happen?
Well, I think a track record is the beginning of it, right? I have a track record of bringing people together. I think why these things are happening It's because no one, for one, understood the process. No one knew that this was going on. And you know, and not just even the Black community, it could be the Hispanic community. You know, a lot of times people feel as though things are going to happen and they have no power to do anything.
Right.
So I'm qualified to be that person because I can be the bridge to connect people, and not just one person, but what about communities?
Right, but how do you plan to do that? How will
Conversation.
you be that bridge? What does that look
Conversation.
like?
So one thing you have to do is build trust, and building trust is being consistent and having conversations. Me not having the conversations, but me more listening than having the conversation, right? But there has to be trust. And with me being a listener, the responses they will hear and that they are hearing are different from the talking points that they've heard before. I understand what goes on, not every community, but I understand how community works. I genuinely want to find a resolve for issues that concern people. That's, you know, I know that's different. But how I would do it is having conversation, listening to us, bringing that information, and bringing people together to have that conversation with one another. So it's not me fighting the fight for them, but I know how to empower them to fight on issues for themselves. So they're not having an attitude or an illusional disagreement with one another. They're fighting against the system. So how do we bring in people together to fight against the system and not themselves?
Okay. All right. Alton, you have a question? Because I'm going to keep going, but
No, that sounds like a mediator's process where, that mediator's listening in, understanding that there are different viewpoints, and hopefully bringing them to the table. And the conversation. I guess that leads me to this question, and I probably just answered it. But as a council member, what would be some of your tools, if you will, for persuasion? We've got conversation. What else would you use? For example, the not higher level, on a different level, your administrations, anything from an executive, president, what have you, they use the power of persuasion. That's about the only tool they've got. But in your toolbox as a legislator on the city level, what would you say some of your most important tools would be?
So I am a organizer by trade.
Okay.
And through those conversations, it's not a conversation that I want to have and I choose the topic. But how you excite people and get people involved is they're giving you what their concerns are and you moving with those concerns. So as an organizer, if you have 10 different concerns, now is how do you prioritize those concerns, make it make sense and blend them in with others so that everybody's on the same page and they're knowing what direction they're moving. So the greatest tool I have is that I understand how to do that. And the biggest issue with this council is that they do not have the will of the people, and the people are in a dismay. So how do we change that and turn that around? I may not know all of the lingo, but a lot of stuff is common sense. And I have realized that if it's difficult, if it's made to be difficult, then they're hiding something. Something's being hidden.
yeah, probably. So, how would you? It's an at-large seat, citywide. You're representing everyone, and there are going to be issues that are important to the Black community. How are you going to champion those issues while at the same time making sure that everybody is heard, everybody feels like you are their member, if you will? Because I think I see a lot of politicians fail in that area, but we've never had a citywide seat really.
You know what I find interesting is that I've had this question asked before: was I going to be biased? And I had to think about that for a second. I said, well, did you ask the last person whether they were going to be biased? How's that working for you? So me being black doesn't say that I'm going to. So I am unapologetically black. Everybody knows that. So I speak how I speak. I resolve how I resolve, and I support how I support. And I have never, not one time, shied away from the work that I've done in the underserved communities. And I've even emphasized that, yeah, I've done a lot of work in the black communities, but I help everybody. Just so happened the black community is underserved. So I don't think that there has to be either or. There shouldn't.
Okay.
I wouldn't.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't stray away from something that the black community is wanting and me supporting it, right? So I wouldn't. Just like if something that South Tampa wants, I would support it. If it's if I'm in the position to do so, but I think that out of 5 issues, 3 of them are exactly the same around the city, and it deals with infrastructure, sidewalks, potholes in streets, transportation. People have the same concerns, but they're just being handled at different times. And when they're handled at different times, the black community can say, wow, you know what? South Tampa, quick story. I was doing a tour of South Tampa, Stephanie Pointer. They gave me the tour of how, all of their concerns. So as I was riding along with them, I would just make comments. Well, why did they do this? And why did they didn't do this? Or, whatever. And she was like, she looked at me, she said, you really get it. I was like, it's common sense.
Mm-hmm.
People don't have the will to do it, right? That's what I'm finding out. So one of the ladies asked me, she says, why is it that people don't like South Tampa? They hate South Tampa. And I said, I don't think they hate South Tampa. I said, I think it's just a facade. I said, just imagine, what if it's the system that's pitting the communities against one another? And she looked at me like, huh? I said, listen, when you drive through South Tampa, Bayshore, it is beautiful. One would think it is just beautiful.
You would think, yes.
When you ride through South Tampa, you riding in potholes. If y'all are really getting what you want with those $1 million homes, your flooding situation would be corrected. But y'all still flood. She said, we complain about that all the time. I said, again, it's the facade that the system is making it beautiful on the outside, and y'all are raggedy on the inside. The unfortunate part is that East Tampa is ragged on the outside and ragged on the end. There's no hiding it, right? They're not putting forth any effort in East Tampa.
Yeah. So I think there's two in that conversation. There's the word of equality and the word equity. And equality is becoming more of the chosen word of the right. Everybody should be treated equal all of a sudden. And on the left, you have more equity. And I'm not sure how those 2 words fit into how you would work with those neighborhoods, as you describe, one being pretty on the outside, raggedy on the inside, and the other one just being plain old raggedy. How do you balance, or how do you?
There's no balance. You just do right by people. It's equity. There's no balance.
Yes. Okay.
I don't have to balance anything. So
then how do you communicate to those various constituents who may favor one word over the other and would rather that you treat us all equal?
No, it's not up to them to dislike, like, or whatever. It's based on my actions. Okay. So I'm not going to treat them. I am very. mind you, so I'm citywide. They have a single member district person, council person, right? So in regards to how I would handle the situation, I am about what's fair, right? So if you have a concern, I'm going to respect what your concerns are, and let's handle it. If East Tampa is having a concern, I am going to respect what their concerns are, and let's handle it. So if you're resolving issues, right, the right way, you don't have to worry about equity, equality, because you're doing the right way. You're doing the right thing you're handling people the right way, and you're resolving their problems. You're not taking away from South Tampa to give to East Tampa. You're just doing right by people.
Yeah, yeah, that's going to be quite the challenge, and it's something that I know you can do. As you said, you excuse me, an organizer, so that talent is going to be necessary. Real quick, and then I'll now hand it over to you. Historic for women majority potential.
Yeah.
Why should women vote for you? And why does this historic for women majority potential mean anything for Tampans? Does that mean anything really?
It should. Women should vote for me because I'm the right person. We've had a male-dominated council for years. This has never happened. And I tell people a serious joke, and it's the truth, right? Women can walk and chew bubblegum at the same time. And
I'm gonna need a T-shirt for you that says exactly that.
And
Yes.
God has, for those who have decided to have babies and so forth, we birthed every living being on this planet, and God entrusted us with that.
Well, what does
So
that have to do with your effectiveness on a council?
I can walk and chew bubbles. I have lived experiences, so I can handle things. A lot of stuff is common sense approach, and people refuse to use common sense approach to resolve issues or to handle issues or even have a conversation. I believe in customer service. And building rapport with people, you have to have great customer service. And it's never me, it's we. So I'm the right person for this seat because it is about the community. I'm just a vessel to push it out there, right? To carry it.
Right, but you and likely the others will be fairly new. How does 3 women that are fairly new on the board influence anything, especially with politics the way that it is? You're new.
That one big.
How in the world are you guys going to influence policy? And
I know I'm going to influence it by people. So if I have in organizing, they're not just coming to talk to me. So they have their constituents that they're concerned about. I'll mobilize. I believe in mobilization, and I believe in those individuals lobbying their city council people.
Yeah.
That's where we've failed. We have failed at is that we put the whole responsibility on one city council member, and it's 4. So those people, just imagine if we have individuals that's concerned and they're coming from south, north, east, and west being represented, and that's Tampa, and they're lobbying their people. Where a lot of council members have gone wrong is they forgot who put them there.
I think you're right.
And
You're
they
absolutely
have
right with that.
forgetting who put them there, they never had a relationship with them.
Yeah,
That's how they can forget.
right.
So when someone pressures them to do something, they fall prey to the pressure.
Yeah, and that pressure is definitely there, and you can see it in some of the votes.
Correct.
That that is not that person, and yet they're voting in a way that's counter to what they've stated in the past that they believe. So
Correct.
I can certainly appreciate that. Alton, we're going to have maybe 2 more questions, so I'm going to give you that next question, and then we're going to have to close out. We did run a little bit late, but we don't want to keep Robin too long.
Well, I guess it's it's less of a question, more of an observation. Um, your approach reminds me of a general counsel. A general counsel, they're in-house and they're first and foremost problem solvers. Lawyers get accused of saying, no, you can't do that. But the general counsel is, well, we're going to help you do that. I may point out some consequences, but I'm definitely going to give recommendations as to how it can be done because that's what matters. And that's what I'm hearing from you. Um, I've been around almost 60 years. I like to say my political life started August 15th, 1974, when Nixon resigned. Was it August 8th, excuse me. I was like, Mom, what's resignation? So I've been doing this professionally and personally for almost 50 years. You're one of the few candidates who one have not seen run from a direct question. Now, that may sound cheesy to some, but when you're looking at politics, it's like, did that woman or did that guy answer that question? They didn't even try. So it's clear that your agenda is serving your community and you're focusing on your tools and you presented your tools. You're a great listener. You believe in conversation. I heard a lot of straight talk. And those are things that, those are tools that I believe you'll bring to the council, especially at this stage in your career. If you're some 20 something, I expect a 20 something to go moving all around trying to, you're past that. So it's quite obvious. So that's really my comment. For a local politician, whether local, state, or federal, most are not known for doing that, and they wonder why they have low popularity ratings. Well, you're not being straightforward. You're too afraid of being seen as wrong versus being seen as someone who can contribute.
All right.
So I will leave you with that.
Thank you. Thank you. I
You're
received
welcome.
that. Um, I don't know who else to, if somebody, what I've heard is if a person can describe or give a definition or a personality about me, is that they always know what they're getting from me. I'm consistent. I don't know, when I decided to run, people, said, you got to be careful this and you have to do. I said, listen, I don't know who else to be. So either you're going to like me or you're not. But I'm always going to, if I know the truth, I'm going to tell the truth. But I'm not going to sugarcoat anything to hide or I am who I am. And it takes more, it's more of a problem to change who you are than to just be straight up. And thus far, me being who I am has gotten me this far. So I receive it. So thank you.
You're welcome.
So for the times that we are in, we need people like you, Robin, and for the little bright spots that we might see around the country where somebody has gotten themselves in office and they have become the truth tellers or the ones who truly become the voice of the people that they represent, their constituents. We don't see that often. So I concur with everything that Alton, who just met you, I concur with what he's saying. I think that two politicians well known that I want to kind of speak to you about in terms of what I think should happen or likely will happen with you in this seat. One, Obama had the people, he had them, right? They put him in there. But I don't think he paid attention to the people for that 8-year span. And he kind of paid attention to all of that stuff going on and all within and left the people out. So there was a lot of people that were disillusioned over time where he had to really fight for that second term. And then there's Donald John Trump, who the people got him in there, and he stayed with the people and continued to represent the people. And to this day, he represents the people and thus controls the party at this point. It's actually the people that are controlling, but he's that conduit through which we see all of this. And if I didn't learn anything else, and this is how I feel about you as a candidate, and I hope that more will recognize that you are truly a voice for the people, and that ability to organize and bring and through relationships, because that's another thing you say all the time, it's relationships. Your ability to organize through those relationships will help ward off a lot of that internal behind the scenes stuff that gets a lot of politicians off track.
Yeah.
But you've got to stay honest to the people.
Yeah.
And I haven't seen many do it. And the one who has been able to do it, I'm just not on his side. But I'm definitely on your side, and would hope that you really do understand. I'm not hoping, I know that you do understand the power of people in these positions. So
Can I say something quickly?
please do.
So you gave an analogy about President Obama,
Mhm.
right? So just imagine, maybe we didn't ask President Obama the right questions, and he already had his agenda already mapped out. They had his agenda mapped out for him.
Right.
And when we don't ask the right questions, we automatically assume that President Obama was going to get in there and be for, he wasn't against black folks, right? But we automatically assume that he's going to, be the savior, do everything, make things right, but we never asked him the right questions. We
You know
never asked him
why?
a question.
I think you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And that's one of the reasons why our show is What is the Ask? Black folks don't have a question. We don't have a question to ask. We Black politicians get in there, and we're so all over the place that they don't really know who or what the real message is, which therefore they get in there and they're susceptible to anything.
Who, the black
Because
politicians?
us, Black
Oh,
people.
oh, black people.
It's
Yeah.
hard. I think it's very difficult, because even on the Tennessee 3, there was Black folks. There were so many different conversations around what they were doing. It was amazing. That how does a Black politician really know what they should be representing for Black folk? And so they can weigh that against everything else that's going on, but at the same time communicate. So maybe we didn't have the question because we're all over the place, and we don't have an agenda. We don't have it. And I know you understand when I say we don't have an agenda that they can adopt to take wherever
But
it is.
you don't
that
have to
we're
hold
going.
their hand. You don't have to hold a black person's hand to understand what the issues of a black community is. Is everything. Now you have to just prioritize it.
Who
So
has
it
to
doesn't-
prioritize it?
Huh? I'm sorry.
Who has to prioritize
They
it?
have to prioritize it. So
We don't all
it doesn't-
agree.
I'm sorry.
Who has to prioritize it? We don't all agree.
All the issues are the same. The issues are the same. So the person that you're electing into office should prioritize it in conversation or in concert with the community. So the issues dealing with black folks is everything. So now you come up with a plan with a timeline in regards to, okay, we handle this, but it's an agreement. So you go to the community and say, you know what, this is what I'm saying. I'm saying we need affordable housing. Now I'm talking about water quality. Until I started talking about water quality in the black community, they ain't know nothing about it.
Right.
But it became important to them. Okay,
Right.
so we have water quality. So I can outline everything that I feel that I'm receiving based on conversations that will make somebody else think it's all over the place.
Yeah.
Now it's me going to the community saying, okay, which one are we going to handle first?
Okay. And I like
Second.
that. I like that because,
So
yeah,
when uh, it's unfortunate that Black people are affected by a whole lot of stuff, and a lot of stuff is systematically happening to them, right? But first, out of this is walking and chewing bubblegum at the same time. Handling issues, you also have to bring the community around in regards to engagement for understanding. Because no matter if you put them in order and say you're going to handle this, and this, and you don't have a community behind you understanding the process and what's going on, then that's your list is nil and is obsolete. Doesn't matter.
yeah,
So that's when you're walking and chewing bubblegum at the same time, organizing and prioritizing, but also bringing the community saying, okay, this is what we have to do and this is why we have to do it.
okay,
And give me your input.
yeah. Well, the communication I think is key. I
Correct.
think you're right. So, Robin, thank you so much for coming on tonight. We didn't get to half the questions, but
Oh,
the key is actually listening to you. And we certainly had an opportunity to do that. So, so our time is up, everybody, with Robin Lockett running for Tampa City Council citywide in District 2. There's only two people, two choices. Choose Robin Lockett. So early voting began yesterday, April 17th, and goes through Sunday, April 23rd. Election day is April 25th. So tell your friends to meet you at the polls. And if you aren't going, send your friends to the polls. Tampa, it is time to make, and I'm going to use this word made up, herstory, not history, Alvin, not history, Alton, herstory.
Herstory.
that.
Okay.
So to learn more about Robin's campaign and what she stands for, her vision for Tampa, you can go to www.voterobinlockett.com. You can also donate to the campaign. Is it still
On the website, yes.
Yeah,
We'll
you
be
can also
collecting.
donate to the campaign. So thank you, Robin, so much for joining us tonight. We really appreciate you.
Thank you. It was very nice, and thank you for the invite.
You bet.